we need to be able to have conversations without feeling like we're going to say something that gets us thrown in jail because people happen to be offended.
Skepticism. Do you know what you believe?
Hey guys, welcome back to the Pangburn Hangout. We are going to be talking to Deniability today. He's going to be leading the conversation. We're going to be chatting about, his kind of line of topics are labeled as sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Deniability has experience with microdosing and psychedelics, so definitely want to get into that with him. I'm excited about that. And rock and roll. It looks like he's in a different place. A few channels. You'll find me. It's okay. I just assume Deniability is just like totally psyched out right now on something. And how's it going, brother?
Good and you?
I'm doing good. How are your holidays?
They were pretty good. And yours?
Yeah, they were good. Really laid back. Hung out with my bro and his girlfriend, and I saw a couple friends, and that was basically it, man.
I just had the family over and the neighbors over. We had a nice chill Christmas.
Nice. Right on.
It's actually cool. There were a couple of grandchildren running around.
Oh.
Kids seem to really bring the spirit to Christmas, I think.
Yeah, man. Especially with the Santa Claus myth is such a fun one. I love that.
And it's nice. Same. I feel a little bad, but like it's nice messing with them a little bit, telling them stories about Santa and how they need to do this to get that.
Yes.
The stress on their faces when they realize that extra cookie might cost them a gift under the tree.
Right. Yes. That's as a kid, that's a tall price to pay. There's a lot of excitement. I'm lucky that my grandpa filmed essentially everything of us growing up. So I have like full documentation of every Christmas. And it's always fun to look back and just to see, like, when the Nintendo 64 came out, that was the big one. Me and my two brothers, when we were unwrapping that and screaming at the highest pitch you wouldn't believe that a child could scream, because it was. And then we got, I think the following year is when Ocarina of Time came out, and that was a big one too.
Tell me, I've always wondered, do you? Because my family hasn't like recorded a lot of Christmases like that, but I've got some fantastic memories in my head. Do you necessarily remember all those Christmases without the videotape?
That's a good question, because the videotape has given me the actual circumstances as they played out. But I do still have memories, like just searching through my memory right now, what emerges is the wrestling matches me and my brothers would have on these huge mounds of snow that my dad would plow for us together. So my dad would plow all the snow all into this huge mountain of snow, and we would have wrestling matches, king of the mountain type thing. and big snowball fights. And yeah, that's something I think about. And I don't think any of that's really documented. So things like that, like I do try to, when I try to not let, the video be the compilation of everything that I remember. But there definitely are instances, and you also have some bad memories and negativity attached to some of these celebrations and some of these things in your past, and so there is some. I think there's always a little bit of bittersweet when reminiscing about memories, because sometimes you'll be thinking about something really positive that happened, and then all of a sudden there'll be this neurological connection to something not so good that also happened, perhaps that year.
I thought I'd ask a question because you don't meet many people that have that sort of video documentation. And
Yeah.
I think about how we've forgotten a lot of our oral memory since the advent of books.
Right.
So our brains are lazy and they're shortcuts,
Yeah.
And instead of remembering things, we're like, okay, we can store it in the book, which means we can forget it. So like we forget phone numbers now because we got cell phones and all that.
Yeah, and it is like, we have so much opportunity for our memory and our brain flying at us so rapidly now, and I've been falling asleep doing audiobooks at 2 or 3 times speed in my ear while I'm revisiting so many books, and I prefer to take them in audibly as opposed to reading them, because I think I can take in information much faster that way. And speed isn't everything necessarily. Sometimes I'll slow down at a certain section. Sometimes I'll speed back up. But I'm also like, it's a bit of a compulsion when it comes to taking in information like that. For me, I like to get a lot of it as well. So
I used to consume information like that, but I found that it really affected my debating. So I would like put forward an argument because the knowledge was sat deeply somewhere in my brain. But like the way memory works is you tend to only remember the relevant things, the lessons, as it were, from a set of memories, and the rest you kind of forget the details. So like you take the intrinsic lesson and you remember that, and that's why what sort of twists our memory and why we don't remember things exactly as they were, because we're just remembering what we learned from them essentially. And I find when I take information in like that without doing multiple levels of processing, so like writing, asking questions, reformulating, paraphrasing, the usual study techniques, I find if I take information like that without doing that, the information will sit in my brain, and when I'm debating with someone, I'll know they're wrong, and I'll put forward why they're wrong, but I can't necessarily justify it. I can't remember where I picked up that piece of information, who said it, what the author was. Whereas if I filter the information through multiple levels of processing, then I can remember the exact book title, maybe even the page number. I can almost quote verbatim the important parts because I've written them down through my levels of processing in my brain. Yeah, and then like I know it, I know why I know it, I know where the thinking comes from and how to review it when I go back through it. But when I just like take in bunches of information, I pick up facts and I don't know why I know this to be true or where it comes from. I find that can be frustrating for me.
Yeah, I rely on my skeptical foundation to navigate through the knowledge that I need. So it's like, I'm recording the knowledge, and the way I kind of do the recall, because you're talking about the recall process of actually interacting with what you're taking in on a multiple sensory level as opposed to just a single sensory level. Because even with audiobooks, if you're taking in the audiobook but also reading the screen, as it kind of reading along with it, that's a much different experience of taking in information than taking in audio. I've always been a very audio driven person when it comes to taking in information. Like, for instance, like strange things, like I've always, since I was very young, like if I heard the hum of a generator, like a Jenny on a work site, and it was going like, then I would want to harmonize with it. Like it's
Yeah, no, I'm completely tone deaf.
like, and when I'm walking through the forest, even, man, it's like I'll hear birds chirping, and I'll be like, yeah, that was a clean A sharp B flat right there. Like it was it was so clean, and it is. I just find the world's very, very musical in general, just because all audio can be put on the pitch scale, on the piano scale. So it's even if it's vibrating between two notes, you can still be like, holy shit, that generator's about to bust down. It's vibrating between B and C natural.
Interesting enough, that there are the neural motor pathways that work exclusively with the auditory nerves, to the point where they've been working with. I mean, it's not like a fix all. They don't quite understand it yet to know what's working behind it. So it works for some people, it doesn't work for all people. But for some like completely disabled people, where there's complete nerve damage and they have no motor control, they've been taking them to music therapy, and it seems to be easier if you're only paralyzed from the waist down, although there has been some movement generated by people paralyzed from the neck down. But they've managed to get people that are paralyzed from the waist down, who they know that the motor neurons are severed, there should be no connection, but they get them listening to music and certain beats, and they find that they can move their legs with the beats, and there seems to be this hidden motor neuron pathway that has to do with our auditory senses.
Let me tell you, brother, I think in my first book, I think I've answered that question. It's very exciting, but I'll make that proclamation now, and you can be the judge of that. It looks like you have a cool question for today's talk on psychedelics.
So welcome, Srijan and Miss Starwalk.
Yeah, welcome.
How you guys doing tonight?
Feel free to speak, boys.
Okay, so psychedelics. Have you guys tried psychedelics? Casually? No. Mace, you haven't tried psychedelics before?
I've not even been drunk before.
You've not even been drunk before?
That's incredible.
Yeah. Ask why?
Because I don't know why anyone would want to.
Look,
hey guys, what's up?
I don't enjoy being drunk. Hey, Casually, we can hear you now. Welcome.
Yeah,
I sympathize with you, Mace. I don't enjoy being drunk myself, but I do enjoy other mind-altering experiences.
I think that's what I'm scared of when it comes to the idea of getting drunk. I'm worried about losing my mind for a short period of time. It just doesn't seem like a good idea.
Look, it can certainly happen when you get to the blackout phases, but that varies for different people. It's not a necessary condition of being drunk, as it were. But it's interesting that you raise that, because one of my draws to psychedelics is specifically because of that lack of control. It's the only drug that I've taken that really expresses lack of control. Many other drugs, you feel inebriated and intoxicated, but there's always an element of, if I can stand up and go to the bathroom if I want to. I can stand up and leave this club and go and walk down the street to another club. There's always like a semi level of control. But I find with psychedelics specifically, you can consume enough to the point where like you forget how to go to the bathroom, or like you want to leave a room but you've gone where the door is, or like you want to walk down the street but like your feet don't want to do it with you, and like you run into a whole bunch of control issues with your motor skills and your vision.
What's the appeal there for you, deniability? Just when you're recalling those, are those kind of the side effects that you're not so passionate about, or are those just, you know, part of the cool adventure?
No, those side effects are very much seek. It's because I struggle to I'm a control freak, especially when I'm running my business. Absolute monster control freak. Like it's my way or the highway, and I just struggle to turn off. And I just notice when I do other narcotics, there's always some element of control, and I can choose not to experience it. But with psychedelics, there's no control, and you can't not experience it. And I think that, I mean, there's an element of seeking the lack of control, and then there's an element of it's also a tremendous learning process. Like specifically when you want it to turn off and you can't turn it off, and you're presented with the possibility of a bad trip and tripping out, that's when it requires a lot of mental discipline to like calm yourself down, remind yourself that it's just the drugs. You took it 3 hours ago, even though it looks like it's not going to end, it's going to end in 4 hours. You just need to chill and not jump off a building, and everything's going to be fine.
Right.
And I find surviving those moments, even though it's not sort of like presented in the real world, it's that presentation of chaos almost, of
Right.
like pure chaos, and not knowing how to deal with it initially, and then somehow pulling through it with nothing but mental discipline. I
Right.
feel like that brings discipline into your life when you're sober and not tripping in and engaging with the world. And I suppose that's another one of the draws to psychedelics for me, is that, I mean, that's just one example. There's many examples. Like if you master being able to set a goal to fix when you're on psychedelics,
Yeah.
you can come out with a solution and the confidence to enact it, and the willpower and drive to pursue it. It's amazing.
What are
But
some
yeah,
of and your question is, you know, you're asking, do you want to pose your question?
yes, yeah. So that's why I was asking how people, if anyone,
And
ended up
I've,
with
yeah,
psychedelics.
by the way, I've never tried a psychedelic. I am going to try this year. I've
Oh,
got,
I saw you post that you're going to do your first time live on cam.
no, I'm not
I
doing it
would.
live. I'm not doing it live on cam. It's on
Are you doing it alone?
it'll be recorded though.
Are you doing it alone?
Um, I've come up with a few different scenarios. I think it's going to be me and my piano. I think that's basically how I'm going to do it. Me in a room with just my piano, and yeah, we'll see what happens. That's kind of the plan.
I'd highly recommend finding someone to do it with, or just doing a half a macrodose,
Oh, it
because
would be such a small amount. Like,
okay.
you
And are
know,
you doing shrooms?
I think shrooms. Yeah, for the first go, definitely.
Yeah. Never do LSD alone until you're properly mentally prepared,
Right.
because there's a thing with hallucinogens called tent syndrome, and it comes from trance parties. And like the thing you never do is, like, when you're on the dance floor and you need a little bit more cash for the bar,
Yeah.
you never go back to the tent by yourself. Rule number one about trance parties: when you're tripping,
Yeah.
Never go back to the tent by yourself. You'll leave, say, I'll be back in 5 minutes, and no one will see you for the next 4 hours. And someone will arrive at your tent the next morning to like a traumatized, like shaking individual with fear of the tent collapsing in on him.
That's good. I mean,
yeah.
it's good advice.
It's just it's nice to have a buddy for that reason. And then the other reason specific to acid is it's known to swap nerve experiences. So I had an experience with one of my best buddies on the West Coast, and the West Coast, the water's like super cold.
Yeah.
It's the Atlantic Ocean, I think, and they we were chilling in the sun, and he went for a swim. I was watching him, I'm like, dude, you're crazy. That's fucking cold. And then he was there, chilling, and he chilled there for a solid hour because his cold receptors has swapped to pleasure receptors. So he's in there having a jolt of a time.
Yeah.
But I had to save his life because he was going blue, and he didn't realize it, and he didn't know it. I had to pull him out and cover him with hot beach sand and prevent him from going hypothermic.
Yeah, actually, one thing about that reminds me of is I got so drunk one time when I was 16, I think I was, that, you know, I think even getting to a level of drunk that can happen because I was literally passed out in a snowbank rolling in snow, like cold snow. Couldn't even realize like how you know, dangerous that was.
So, to my question, so yeah, they can be dangerous. Like, don't underestimate them. Rather do them with a buddy. Like even now, I do solo trips, but like that's literally after hundreds of trips, and I'm almost immune to bad trips now. I can bring myself back from the curve very easily.
Right.
But for most people when they're starting out, that they need a buddy to. Buddy system solves all things, and then it's more enjoyable as well.
Yeah, I
mean,
mean,
you realize the invention of shoes and how useful they are. You'll laugh a lot with your friends.
Yeah, I think I have a you know, a really good friend that I'm gonna have there, and also I think my neurologist is interested in being there, but I won't be, you know, publicly saying who that is. But
whoever's there, they have to be doing it with you. There's nothing that can push you to a bad trip more than being around people that aren't sharing the same experience.
But isn't that it? Is there actual evidence to demonstrate that?
Yeah. So I mean, not like evidence, but like anyone experienced in psychedelics will tell you that your environment matters hugely. Like,
Sure.
You can guarantee a super good trip if you are specifically not in a built-up environment.
Right.
Like if you're around nature, there's something about the way you hallucinate when you're hallucinating, because it's very rare that you like see things that aren't there. Usually the things that are there twist and distort out of shape. So when you're in nature, there's something about the textures in nature that it seems natural when you're hallucinating, and it's an enjoyable experience. When you're in a built-up environment, your brain sort of knows that roof doesn't look like that, and that could be a pleasurable experience. It could also make you freak out a little bit. So not being in I mean, it's not to say that being in a built-up area will freak you out. It's more a confluence of issues, you know. But the biggest one seems to be being in a natural environment versus a built-up environment. But then I'd say almost of equal importance seems to be doing it with people you trust, and in a environment where you're not in fear of criminals, you're not in fear of being caught by the police, you're not in fear of being called into work, you've turned your phone off. Like, you need to commit to that 6 to 8 hour period. You're not going to be able to do anything. You're not going to be able to talk effectively to anyone. You're not going to be able to defend yourself, and you need to be in this place where it's okay to be like that.
Right. Interesting.
And then pretty much like I do a lot of first timers, and I always take them out to nature, and it's a small group of people they trust. We work on developing a trust bond. I take them through, because there's moments specific to the trust bond, because there's moments where you'll like look at someone's face and they'll be smiling, chilling with you, but you might see that they're might see like an angry face. You might see like they're judging you too much, and you like very real chance of seeing something that's not there. And the benefit of having someone that's like a best friend and that you trust implicitly is you can go with your brain and say, okay, that's the drugs. They're not skiffing me out. They're not. They're not like looking at me like I finger banged their mother. That's not happening.
And secretly, you definitely are banging their mother. That can be guaranteed. No, I get what you're saying. I've talked to a lot of people about their experience with nature when they're on psychedelics, and there is something very familiar about how I experience nature in my life and how they're describing it. Like, being able to spend a lot of time at one tree, just kind of learning the tree and like the like how much detail there really is in that tree type thing. And I know that's just like some people might experience that, some people don't, but that kind of resonated with me because I grew up around a lot of nature and yeah, that totally rung true with me, where I could, I feel like I could sit and write art and create art just on a small little speck of that tree. Kind of like how Dr. Seuss put the world of who's on a dust particle, right? Or on a snowflake. It's kind of that idea.
So now that we've got a few more people in the room, let me just introduce the question a little bit. I was hoping there'd be a few psychedelic users to stir up a debate here, but it's necessarily been, at least my experience, that taking psychedelics has been a tremendous help in understanding the world around me on multiple levels, on emotional intelligence, being able to like read people, understand the emotions they're projecting out to me. All of this, I will add, is after the trip is done. There seems to be like a learning experience through every trip, and I come back with more confidence. I feel like I understand things a bit more, but never ever certain what specifically I understand a bit more. But when I encounter that situation that I understand a bit more about, there's like an aha moment, maybe a couple months or a couple days or a couple weeks or even years later after that trip. I'll experience something and go, oh, that's what that was about. And even though I couldn't remember, it comes like grinding back, and I go, oh, that was that moment. There's a trend amongst psychedelic users to like everyone's had this experience where they've had this moment of almost complete understanding, but the pure frustration of not being able to verbalize it or express it, but then having realized it weeks later, months later, in a sober setting and experience.
So one thing about that deniability that sparked up for me is that even though one feels that they have found this new complete understanding, they haven't necessarily, but it may feel that way.
So that's where I think there's room for debate, because it does come down to how you craft your experience. So if you go to a trance party, you candy flip, take some MDMA with some acid, and you're around people dancing and partying, you're going to have a party, and you're going to have a ball of a fucking party, and you're not going to necessarily have any spiritual experiences. However, if you're in a teepee out in the desert, you got some rhythmic chanting going on, some trippy paraphernalia like dream catchers floating around that you can look at and give you some hallucinogenic experiences. When you're in that setting, you seem to be able to replicate on a consistent basis some sort of spiritual experience at minimum. And
what do you think? And what do you think that is? Like, what is your interpretation of what that is? Like, I hear people saying all these woo stuff all the time, like, I'm traveling to another dimension, or I'm traveling to see aliens and stuff like that. But, like, tell me honestly what you think that is. Because I have an idea, but I really want to know what you think.
So I've had a build-up of psychedelic experiences. I started with mushrooms. There was a lot of luckies, South African slang, a lot of laughter and good, happy feelings and vibes, mild hallucinations, visual hallucinations, and not too many inner hallucinations. So like there's a mental side, a visual side, and then an emotional side to these drugs. So with mushrooms, it's high positive emotions and medium visual hallucinations and almost zero mental hallucinations. Then when you step into LSD, it's a bit more on the mental hallucinations, not too much, but then a lot more on the visual hallucinations, and sort of similar to mushrooms on, well, depending on the mushroom spore you take, there are some exceptions to this, and then similar to the mushrooms on the happy emotions vibe. For those two hallucinogenic experiences, I was firmly of the opinion that this was just a party thing, like
Right.
you're not experiencing anything that's real. It's just great, it's cool, awesome. However, when I got to DMT and ayahuasca, it's a very different experience. DMT and ayahuasca, say low to medium on visual hallucinations, but like super, super hectic mental hallucinations.
Such as?
You you can dive into your past. Like with ayahuasca, it's not so intense. With DMT, it's a little bit more intense. You can experience time dilation. You can dive into past memories. You can have some really horrible experiences going through past traumatic events. You can also do there's a lot, like I've had it twice with astral projection. I mean, I don't know a better term for it, but like a feeling of out of body experience, and
Right.
like you're zooming out of the earth and into the
The
cosmos,
rocket ship feeling. I've heard that described a lot. They just, whew. And I've watched a lot of video footage recently of people going through this, and it seems to be, it's pretty quick. It looks like it, 10, 15 seconds.
So the thing about DMT and ayahuasca is like DMT, we have DMT in our bodies all the time,
Right.
and it's a natural chemical in most animals and plants, and as such we process it very quickly. So you can almost think that we're sort of drug addicts with DMT and with high tolerance almost. And when you take DMT, it lasts 10 to 15 seconds. However, you can experience an hour to 2 hours in those 15 seconds. So that there's a huge time dilation effect to it. But that doesn't always happen, With ayahuasca tea, though, what they do is they brew it with I forget the plants, but there's a couple plants in the Amazon that have a specific protein that when you brew the DMT with these to make ayahuasca tea, the proteins, I don't know the exact science, but I guess they do something like coat the DMT to prevent the body from metabolizing it so quickly, and then you can have like a nice 4 to 6 hour experience on the drug.
Dude, do you know what I see when I see people on ayahuasca? It's almost like everything about their software dies and they're just functioning on a hardware level. Like I've seen people crawling, like they're crawling. It's like it's like they're like hunting and gathering for like scraps. I don't know how to explain it, but do you get what I mean, or is that just some people's experience?
Completely get what you mean. I mean, I had an experience with ayahuasca where it was so intense, and I was starting to have a bad trip. So like I went to go lie down outside, and literally for the next 4 hours I didn't move because I felt like I was being sucked into the earth. And like even though like I was just like lying like a retard on top of the earth, I felt like I had like sunk into the earth and become part of the earth, and I could feel the heartbeat of the mountainside that I was on, and like I was just sitting there for 4 hours.
That's sick.
And like that's what I enjoy most about it. You don't have to do much, you know. You can just enjoy it.
Sam
So bringing
Harris.
it back to
Sorry, just 2 seconds. I just want to say Sam Harris told me about this fucking trip that he had on DMT when he was out. I think it was DMT or ayahuasca, but he was out by himself in a canoe. Or canoe or just a little boat out in the middle of water. He wanted to have the experience of seeing the sunrise or the sunset in the distance on this river, and he thought this was going to be the best fucking experience of his life, but it went very wrong. Where he just kind of he just said he kind of curled up and there was no way to escape. Like he felt like he had to escape the boat he was on, like the situation he was in, but he couldn't escape. He had to just sit there and take it. And I just wanted to say that because it seems like some people think that they can create these perfect environments for this brain poison that they're going to experience, but kind of like alcohol, it's like you feel like you're in a perfect environment, and then all of a sudden someone might say something to someone, and all of a sudden you find yourself in a bar fight, and a beer bottle's getting broke on the back of your head. But in Sam's situation, in that story, it's just like, fuck, like I did and this was at a time where he had a lot of experience with it, but he was really excited about this trip, but it just didn't turn out that way.
Yeah, I've learned sunrises, not sunsets. Any form of isolation can tend to turn things very sour. That's why tripping by yourself, it's a challenge. It's a huge mental challenge. It's something I enjoy, but it's something I know when I do, there's a 50-60% chance that I'll be called up for like an hour or two trying to like convince myself the world isn't coming to an end.
When you say you just said world coming to an end, is that it? Are you feeling like an impending doom feeling like before I was medicated for my clinical depression, like there's this thing that happens with panic disorder where you this sense of impending doom, and then all of a sudden you're like, this is it, I'm gonna fucking die here. Is it kind of like that? Like, is it a death fear?
No, it's more like an existential fear.
Okay. Yeah.
To be honest, it can range a lot. Like, it can be as small as, fuck, I don't know when last I went to pee, and
yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Like
I'm gonna explode.
No, but then you get worried because you can't feel your bladder, and you're like, but I've forgotten how to pee, and like, is my bladder going to explode? Like, and that's also what I've learned. Do it on a full stomach, because the nerve switch thing happens on multiple levels, and like the quickest way to a bad trip that I found is hunger, because you can't eat when you're tripping. And if you trip on an empty stomach, that hunger feeling, it twists into something else. And because it's a negative feeling, there's a chance that it can twist into a negative hallucination, and that can be quite a horrible experience.
Right.
So like, I've just learned super comfort. Don't be hungry. Don't like have a need for anything. So bring everything you need around you: snacks, drinks, weed, whatever you sort of want, you know.
So you think mixing weed is an all right thing? Based on your experience?
Not for first-time users. If you're an experienced marijuana user and you're over your initial paranoid phase, yes, it's a fantastic mixture, because with a lot of hallucinogens, you get a lot of mucus buildup, and the dry mouth from the marijuana counters that, and it can be quite irritating during the experience to always have this mucus building up and this need to spit or blow your nose. Whereas like that's why I enjoy mostly doing it by the ocean side, because it does that as well. Like the salt water, when you swim in the ocean, it dries up your nasal passage and your mucus glands, and marijuana seems to do that as well. And
interesting.
Then it's specifically with mushrooms, it pairs very well, and you get a lot more colors and brightness out of the hallucinations. However, if you're not an experienced marijuana user and you're not over your paranoid phase, it can trigger a negative
Some
trip quite
anxiety.
quickly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that it tends to maximize your current experience. So, and that's why I focus so carefully around engineering the environment. Because if you're in an environment where you're worried about the police catching you, that's like a negative emotion. That's a pathway to a negative trip.
Yeah.
If you're in fear of criminals, that's a pathway to a negative trip. So like always try to be as comfortable as possible, and like it's amazing how just being prepared ahead of time. So like if you're going to do it in your flat, I'd recommend doing things like have a couple cooked meals that you can just chuck in the microwaves, because you can have a panic where like, oh, I don't know how to cook it. Oh wait, I prepared food. I just need to remember how to use the microwave, and then I'll be okay. And then you eliminate that, So the preparation, because no one's immune to a bad trip, but being well prepared and engineering your environment to the point where you know where everything is, then when you do face that demon that comes for you, you can go, oh, but I did this, so no, it's not an issue.
Right.
And,
Right.
like,
Right.
it helps tremendously.
Mm.
So yeah, welcome, Zombie. I see you crept in there. What do you? I'm interested to hear your thoughts on psychedelics as a police officer.
Well, I don't have any experiences with them, but mushrooms are now legal in my state. So we'll see what
Have you had
what comes about.
Do you have any stories about people tripping, being arrested?
Ooh.
a lot of stories, but yeah, just people being very, very paranoid.
Yeah, no, back of a police car, bad trip instantly.
Oh no! Years ago, when I lived on the East Coast, I had a friend who did some PCP. So I don't know if is that considered a psychedelic?
It is. It's one of the few that I haven't tried. It's not available in
Yeah,
Africa,
and,
unfortunately.
and he ran out a 3-story window and was in the hospital for quite a while. Almost lost the use of his legs, but
Shit.
is fully recovered now and still in a lot of pain, But yeah, I don't have a lot of personal use
So
experiences.
Travis,
Well, none
remember
at all.
buddy system, Travis. We don't want you running out your apartment window. No, I must say I've never had that inclination, specifically with mushrooms and LSD.
Right.
Sometimes with ayahuasca.
Microdose.
Sorry, Daltu?
Pangburn is just microdosing, right? He's not taking.
I think that's where I would, get some level of experience out of some small dose of something and get a little taste for it, and then possibly do a trip after that just to map the psychological effects.
So
Yeah,
microdosing won't approach anything we've talked about so far. Like
Right.
it's not even like a dip your toe type of experience.
Right.
You won't hallucinate. It like turns colors and brightnesses up.
Right.
And like a lot of high, it seems to heighten your EQ. I think that's where a lot of like bad trips happen. It's because you've got heightened EQ, and if you're at a party and you see someone else having a bad trip, it can trigger a bad trip in you. Because like you can like empathize with them and like go, oh shit, and like they're feeling that, they must be feeling like that. Oh shit, I'm feeling like that.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah,
So just to like pose the question here, now that we've had a sort of introduction, are they necessary for a complete understanding of reality? Many people that have taken them at least once in their lifetimes do experience a change. For every person, it seems to be different. It seems, but like for the most part, on an anecdotal basis, because I'm not aware of any studies that have been done on this level, people seem to experience being better people, and more open-minded, I guess. Casually,
Oh, I'm
I
an
think your
idiot.
mic's dying on you there.
Can you hear me, guys?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yeah, so like on psychedelics, I've read two books where psychedelic experiences are mentioned. One of them is by Richard Feynman and another one by Sam Harris. Uh, so I don't know much about it, but in the Feynman one, interestingly, he mentions about psychedelics with sensory deprivating tanks. They were very new back then in the 1980s or 70s. Yeah, so he mentions about how he could get experiences while not even taking that hard drugs, like only with drugs that may still be legal. He could get in psychedelic and hallucinogenic experiences in sensory deprivation tanks without any use of hard drugs. So I don't know much about this topic, to be honest.
It's interesting that you bring that up. Because sensory deprivation does seem to have hallucinogenic experiences. To bring a little bit of science into the question I'm posing, most drugs are poisons. Like the overwhelming majority, they're they're just poisons that have a pleasurable effect on the body. However, sort of exclusive to cannabis and psilocybin, and DMT, there are evolved receptors in our bodies and brains for these drugs specifically. And I take that as a sort of evidentiary claim that we should be using both of these drugs on some level. I'm not sure what that level is, but I'm a big believer in evolution, and if we've evolved to interact with these things, I think it's something that we should, at minimum, see if there is any value to interacting with these things. And I think that to sort of bring it back to the question, one of the recent challenges with artificial intelligence is teaching a robot how to describe the objective world around us. And we thought this was as easy as describing the object in space and time, but turns out it's not as easy as that. It turns out there's near infinite interpretations of the world around us, but there's only a finite set of workable interpretations. And getting a computer to see these workable interpretations seems to be problematic in the least. And that sort of led me to this question of, if we've got evolved sensory, well, not sensory, we've got evolved parts of our body that are meant to be used with DMT and psilocybin, and all these people having anecdotal experiences of some level of spirituality or astral projection. Um, who knows? Maybe, like I said at the start, at least with DMT, it appears that we seem to be DMT addicts with a high tolerance for DMT, because our bodies process it very quickly and the effect doesn't last very long. Maybe by virtue of the fact of DMT being present in all living organisms, perhaps it's how we sort of chemically arrive at that finite set of interpretations of the world that seems workable.
Just one question. Do you know a drug called 5-ME or DMT? It's like DMT, but it's like in another phase,
You're not just
another
talking about
class.
ayahuasca. I haven't heard of it.
Yeah, it's very similar to DMT, but it's almost like a poison if you take it if you take it in as the amounts of DMT. If you take it in the amounts of DMT, it could easily kill you if you take it in. It's very small amount. It's supposed to be taken in very small amounts, and like it's basically co-termed as an abusive drug. Although it's although if you could place it beside DMT, nobody would even know the difference. That's the similarity between them. Just one less carbon bond. That's it.
Never heard it. Just maybe drop some reading material there in the live YouTube feed there, and then I'll have a look at it. Maybe
Yeah,
talk
I'll do
about it
that.
for our next psychedelic show. But yeah, so I I think it's a very difficult thing to research and understand, but I think there's at least enough anecdotal evidence to explore the question if psychedelics are sort of intrinsic to how we interpret the world around us.
I would say no, they aren't necessary. They might be necessary for understanding your own mind in a very specific way by having it. Because I tend to think of psychedelics as like shutting off the most new parts of your brain. It just kind of like slowly shuts them down, so you'll start to lose specific abilities to conceptualize specific things like time and even distance and space. Sometimes it'll kind of fuck with you, and so you can kind of learn via experiencing losing parts of your mind what you are essentially, that you're kind of one big fluid, movable, affectable thing. So there's a lesson there, but I don't think it's necessary, really.
Well, that really brings a very good point, because I remember there are many physicists who believe that the world is simulation, and one of them brought up this particular topic in a debate that I saw last week, I think, and he said that like he brought it up as a point. He said that when we take psychedelic drugs, we are distorting the simulation of the world. So if the universe is a simulation, the DMT acts like a distortion to that simulation. So that was a very good point that I like to point out.
If you consider your brain creating a simulation, DMT or mushrooms are distorting your internal simulation you make of the outside world. Yes, I agree with that.
Yeah, it's just if someone's going to claim that there is anything outside of the imagination, outside of your own brain state going on, like if you're saying like, oh, I'm connecting with a new dimension, or I'm connecting with a greater understanding of X, the next question is, okay, what is your greater understanding? And then if someone's like, oh, it came from aliens and they told me that, we need to start sacrificing pigs to the alien god. You need demonstrations of these things, and that's not to say that. But I think all of this connects to the same things we can get through art. You can have transcending artistic experiences that are very much. I talked about one the other day, and I'm not going to talk about it again, but people can listen to my story about my drama teacher and kind of enlightening me to the artistic power of Shakespeare. But I think there are ways to experience through our own, the natural chemicals that deniability was talking about, that we experience in our minds, like through orgasm and through all of these, awesome things that we can get good experiences out of. I think that this is just another way and another version of doing that. A more, poison of the brain, and even if our body already has these substances in it, you're still overdosing based on what you're normally used to processing. That's what you're doing when you're taking the actual drug.
I disagree on the first point, that the initial point that you made about like the universe. Like I just told that if the universe is a simulation, then it is a good thing to ponder upon that after taking these psychedelic experiences, the simulator might, brain may not be able to, may not, could start seeing things in another dimension or another. Uh, uh,
Yeah.
I cannot disprove that, but you cannot disprove that. I cannot prove that. Yeah, but it's a good thing to ponder upon. It's nothing more. It's just a
Well, it's
surface
art.
level thing.
It's an artistic idea. It's not necessarily connected to what is. Because sure, we can sit back and say it's possible that we're in a simulation. It's possible that this drug is making this connection with the matrix controller, whatever. But that doesn't. That's as much as saying it's possible that Shakespeare is still alive. It's like the realm of possibility is endless. But the the realm of plausibility doesn't seem to be endless, and this is why we use the scientific method.
I think you're confusing possibility and probability. It is probable that the world is a simulation.
No,
There
it's
is a
not.
probability
No, it's not.
that the
It's
world.
not probable.
I,
Like you can't use the term probable to say that because something it is possible that it's then at some level probable. It's not. That's not the way those two terms work.
well, I'll just bring it up if you like. I'll post it in the chat.
Sure.
The reason I sort of started seeing if anyone in the room had experienced psychedelics is that there seems to be a lot of bad information out there. Like, if you ever see Hollywood regurgitations of what psychedelic experiences are like, they're often wrong. Like the whole I saw Batman and had a conversation with him. That doesn't happen. Like unless a tree morphed into something that maybe looked like Batman and you looked at it twice, like maybe possible, but like you're not like gonna see stuff that's not there unless you're doing a mental hallucination. So like people claiming that they have their eyes open and they were having a conversation with a 6-foot dragon, no, that does not happen. Astral projections, a little bit difficult for me to wrap my head around and dismiss. I will say, specifically DMT and ayahuasca, those experiences are so powerful that even for the most skeptical mind, you struggle to go, how do I categorize what I just experienced? But sorry, I got it distracted there. The reason I asked if anyone had done this before is because I don't recall having deeper understandings about spiritual experiences. I mean, this is a fairly pedestrian example, but just something as simple as shoes, right? We take shoes for granted. Go take a walk in the forest without shoes, and you'll have a sudden realization of what the value of shoes are. And then you can have like a sort of twist off from there of how the fuck could the world work without shoes? And then and I mean, it's hard to describe, but like when I talk about deeper understanding, it's not about understanding things that aren't there. It's about understanding things that are there in a different way. It's like you see them in a different light. So what's interesting when you bring up the simulation thing is in philosophy, there's this radical disbelief concept raised by René Descartes, and a lot of other moral philosophers have built onto that to say that we really can't trust the five senses. That you ought to be philosophically skeptical about what you see, hear, touch, and feel. Because it is a simulation. I mean, you don't see the world as it is. You see it as interpreted by your brain. And maybe hallucinogenics are a way of breaking how your brain sees it. And when people have this claim of deeper levels of understanding that they cannot quite describe. It's quite weird. Like in the moment when you're tripping off your mind, you know what it is. You just understand it. But then the minute you try to explain it to someone, it evaporates like smoke.
Language fails.
Yeah, and I just don't know how
Well, I've
else
heard,
to explain it.
deniability. I've heard people like Sam Harris explain it quite clearly and quite well and quite mapped out. So do you think that's just kind of something that is part of the journey that you must continue to take with this, or is it something that do you think some people are going to be able to explain and some others aren't?
I think if you are doing it from a scientific approach, which ultimately I've never done before, maybe you could put your finger on it, as it were. My specific way of approaching hallucinogenics is to take a really high dose and take my mind to a place where it's forced to deal with it. Like there's no tools available, nothing to mitigate the situation.
Right.
And I found that a lot of my insecurities, I'm forced to face them. So like I got over a fear of speaking in public on a hallucinogenic trip. I took like 12 grams of mushrooms and I ate them and I
Is
went
that a
on
big dose?
Kinda. It depends on the mushrooms.
Right.
I'd say probably the equivalent of 6 to 8 grams of quality mushrooms, because these were gold caps. But like if you're taking blue Amazons, you could probably have the same experience, about 6 grams. And most people will have a macro dose heavy hallucinogenic experience with about 2 grams of mushrooms for their first couple times.
Right.
So 12 grams, it's not a small amount, but it's not like a huge amount. Most I've taken is about 24. But yeah, I took 12 grams and it was, it takes about an hour and a half to hit. So I spent that hour and a half meditating about all my past traumatic experiences of going and speaking publicly and sort of trying to bring the fear to the forefront.
Right.
And then when it came on, it wasn't a particularly pleasant trip because I was actively engaging in fear and negative emotion, and it sent me on a downward spiral into a negative trip. But that's sort of like the climbing the mountain, as it were. And after that trip, went and spoke to 5,000 people with a prepared speech and had 0 no's. It was amazing. So like when I talk about understanding, it's not like on a spiritual level, like I understand the connection with God. I understand something that's real, like a connection I have with my insecurities, a connection I have with my girlfriend, how I manage my employees at work. I could have a sudden epiphany about, you know what, I've been talking to them like this and it's not generating the results, but I know this to be a very motivating thing. If I just tweet it like this, I could like really get them. And
Right.
This is an actual experience I've had when I had to learn how to manage employees about 10 years ago. I took a massive macrodose and went looking for this answer, like where am I fucking up? And I found that answer. And it's important to understand, like it's so hard to verbalize that when you hit that moment of just peak understanding, as I would phrase it. And as you're coming down, it like I've tried to write it down or talk to my tripping partner about it, and it evaporates like smoke. But then in the example I was just giving, the sort of the understanding came back to me when I was in a training meeting, and I had like the sudden realization, and it was there, and I could use it.
Right. Interesting.
So I don't know. Maybe if I record, like, and maybe this is just me. I don't know how to write when I'm tripping. I've seen
Mm.
one of my best buds is a fantastic artist. I look at a piece of paper when I'm tripping and it's squiggly and everything's going everywhere, and it's just no hope I'm reading that. But my buddy, he's an artist, and he's like, this one trip, like he forgot how to speak, and like he was
Mm.
drawing pictures, and I asked him like, Tim, how do you feel? And like you've been quiet for a while, and he's like, wait. It's like he put his hands up, and then he started drawing. And then I asked him, dude, like, are you okay? And he's like, no. He's like putting his hands like, wait. Literally, like 3 hours later, he comes and he like turns the picture that he's drawing around to me, and then as soon as he did that, he's like, oh, dude, I can talk now again. And he's like, this is how I feel. And it was this picture of this goblin sitting on the balls of his feet with fairy wings and like fires coming out of his nostrils and like these like demonesque horns. And it was just like weird how he could like draw, and like it was a beautiful drawing, but how he could draw in that little detail while tripping so hard. But like, yeah, maybe some people can write that stuff down. I'm not so sure that I can.
Well, I plan to try to see what emerges out of my musicality while experiencing this.
If you're microdosing, you can totally do that by yourself, and you'll have a ball of a time. Have you ever used Concerta?
Concerta.
Ritalin.
No, I haven't. No, I haven't used anything except marijuana in my life. So, and alcohol.
So it's a lot. Microdosing is a lot like Ritalin, just without that chemical feel to it. That like whenever you do uppers, you get this like dirty chemical feel, and microdosing seems to have that same sort of increase in cognition and EQ and all those beneficial effects without those horrible side effects.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah, casually. Thanks for the awesome idea. I think I'm gonna go try a trip in a sensory deprivation tank.
Yeah.
That'll probably be a very interesting experience. So, does anyone have any inclination to try, but they're just too scared? I know, Mace, you were talking about not wanting to try any mind-altering substances for fear of what you might do. And I think I give you a sort of reinforce that fear with hallucinogenics. But why do you specifically have a fear of mind-altering substances? Have you had a negative experience?
Well, for me personally, I don't think I need sensory deprivation tanks. I just need my home. I'm already sensory deprived. And about the weed and stuff, I live in India, so even weed is illegal here. Even weed. And like it's the damn United States fault. After that, like that drug war that they lost in 1980s, they banned weed. Weed, hard drugs were legal in India in 1980s. Yeah, this shitty. See, people always say Reagan is good. Reagan is good. You know, he's a shitty. He's the shittest president of the United States. I'm gonna tell you that. He banned all drugs in India are banned, like almost all. Not even medical weed is allowed. Not even medical weed, and like they're one step away from banning beer, which I don't think they'll do. But it's like the 2020 was a big year for the drugs and all that because like because one side of the political spectrum supports it and the other side hates it. Yeah, so it's a big war for drugs. It's gonna be big in India. I'm feeling it.
Well, hopefully COVID will come to your rescue. There's been recent findings that the anti-inflammatory effects of CBD seem to be of benefit for dampening the lung inflammation from COVID. So if you're struggling to breathe while you're experiencing COVID, go smoke a joint. But Mace, sorry, we got sidetracked there. I'm very interested as to why you're afraid of mind-altering substances, because it's and more specifically, what do you do to break your sobriety?
I'm not familiar with the word sobriety. What does that mean?
So being sober, and if I can frame it for a second, it's my personal belief that nobody can go through life entirely sober. We all need something, and I've brought that to many things. So it could be food. For some people, it's food. Some people, it's drugs. Some people, it's alcohol. Some people, it's just cigarettes. Others, it's exercise and the endorphins they get from that. But I have a big belief that you can't go through life sort of stationarily sober. You need something to break that sobriety in your brain. If you're not looking into
okay. So when you said sober, you didn't necessarily mean actually sober. You just meant without some sort of enjoyment.
Not even specifically enjoyment, but like I just don't think people can be stuck in neutral. I think you need an adrenaline rush at minimum. You need something to make you feel, you know?
I don't know, I'm afraid.
So you don't exercise, you're not an adrenaline junkie, you're not like running marathons to get endorphins, and you're not taking any mind-altering substances.
Like you just go through I used to lift weights, but haven't done in a while because we've been in lockdown all year. I mean, all of 2020, and this year as well.
So there is deniability. There is some bad effects that can happen through these trips. Would you agree?
Yes, no, definitely. That's the
because I think there is some rationale in being worried about you being, one of the outlying statistical realities of people who just fall off the deep end after one of these trips.
Yeah, so full disclosure, if you go on a bad trip, and it doesn't matter what you do, you can always go on a bad trip. If you struggle to resolve that bad trip in the bad trip, it can potentially stay with you for a prolonged period of time. One of my good friends had a really bad trip, and we took like a 6-hour trip, and the last hour and a half he started thinking we were out to kill him, and he was running away from us and hiding, and we didn't find him till after the trip had worn off. And when we did find him, it was clear that he was still sort of stuck in his bad trip, and we eventually managed to calm him down to the point where we could drive home. But if I'm honest, I'd say it affected him for almost 6 months after the trip. He was very paranoid of us, very distrustful. It wasn't a pleasant experience for him. And this has been my experience. The more insecurities you have, the higher possibility of a negative trip. If you're, which presents an irony, because the bad trips are where you learn the most. It's when you confront fears and confront insecurities that you experience the most growth. So on some level, you want a bad trip, but I'd say that you wouldn't be able to handle it until you've had a good amount of tripping, like 10 to 20 trips at least. I always advise the first experience is with someone you trust implicitly. Trusting them implicitly, being outside of a built-up environment, and this is for macrodosing, not microdosing, being outside of a built-up environment, away from police, away from potential crime, with people you trust, with all the things you need to survive for the period you're tripping. You check all those boxes, 90% chance you're not going to have a bad trip. And if you do start turning to have a bad trip, you'll have the tools with you to deal with that. But yeah, if you're just doing microdosing, Travis, cool. But I've got a lot of concern for you doing a macrodose for your first time by yourself.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. I'll definitely have someone there or people there for sure. But I think it will be a microdose thing. Like, yeah. I need to go back here. I'm just sending someone on Twitch wants to get into the Discord here. There we go.
I have done psychedelics. I think I actually said that yet, so I'll put that on the.
What psychedelics have you done? And have you had any moments of pure understanding?
So
Water does not count.
Mushrooms are pretty much the ones I do mainly, and I've mostly had normal, consistent trips with them. I had one same one that blew my mind, and I still talk about it, but it's a long story. And then I've done DMT out of like a little vape pen type thing, and I think that it had ketamine, so it may not have been full something. I met some people at one point that weren't on it, and that's about it.
Interesting.
As far as I can.
And what were the experiences like? Like,
my first trip was, I noticed that I couldn't keep track of time, and it started feeling like everything I was doing, I was getting a sense of deja vu, like I had just finished this part of this event, and now we're playing video games, but we just played video games, so I don't really, and that was just the whole night, and it almost felt like I could have stayed in the night and just like gone back and forth through time, repeating everything. And then the second trip was really just cool, walking in nature, looking at clouds. And then I think it was the third trip that was crazy, where I it started out way more visual, and it was a different type of mushroom. It was like, not all mushrooms are the same. There's definitely a difference between them, and this was my first time having something that wasn't like, I think it's I forgot. I can't even remember the names of the mushrooms, but it was something. It had like blue on it. It was all special looking, and I was seeing like rocks melting down the sides of hills at first. Like, this is within the first hour. Rocks are melting down the sides of hills. The river sounds like music. It sounds like it's building up to a beat drop. And because I was camping, and like the trees looked animated. Like, if you've ever played Borderlands, they looked like they had a black outline. And it got even more intense when the trees started like fractaling in their branches. They would fractal into little infinite trees. And then I separated myself from everyone. Or they said they went to go get firewood, and I went and sat in a car. And I was unconscious, and at that point, like, I as soon as I sat down, I was unconscious. And then I was like out of my body, traveling dimensions, meeting beings. I met myself. I lived in the body of another person for a few minutes.
I have to ask. You just said you met yourself. Can you describe that the best you can?
It was literally like the most Hollywood sort of thing, except it was during kind of the peak. I had like just gotten over turning inside out, which was a weird experience. And then I was popped into this infinite white room, like in TV, and I saw myself standing there. And I ran up to me and said, "Banana boat, rainbow sunshine." And I went, "What?" And then I was like panicking and really needed my own help and just couldn't say anything but random gibberish sentences.
Banana boat, rainbow, sunshine. It makes sense to me, brother.
Yep, it was profound insight.
Wow.
You know what you were doing whilst
What did
these
Jesus say to the
hallucinations
follower?
were happening.
Well,
It sounds like you had an experience with Mexican or Amazonian blues. They got deep, dark blue veins on them, and significantly different from golden caps. Gold caps have like mushrooms are nice to not have bad trips on, especially if you're taking gold caps because they're very high on the emotional scale, like a lot of positive vibes, positive emotions, and that does a lot to counter any sort of negativity that could send you into a downward spiral.
yeah, everything I experienced would have been a bad trip if I wasn't already just high in my mental fortitude naturally. Because, like I said, I turned inside out. I met God at one point. It was just a crazy evening, and I could see how anyone could wake up and not be a sane human after that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. Like, people do worry about, not being well after like losing who they are. You know.
It's a scary experience.
I will say maybe Daltu has had a different experience. All my bad trips have been, I've definitely been different afterwards, but I'd say different better in almost across the board. Unanimously, it's a you are changed, but like not like in a negative way. I don't know, Daltu, after that third experience when you felt changed, did you? I don't want to put words in your mouth. What did you feel changed for the worse or the better?
At first, I couldn't tell. I felt changed, but I gave it like the first week. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what had happened, and then after that first week, I kind of started. It was almost like I had obliterated my view of my own self, my own ego, my own mental mind. This thing I had viewed this thing as separate from me, and now I had realized that, oh no, I'm actually a physical thing, and if you just put a chemical in my body, I will speak to God, and all this crazy shit will happen. Right. And God told me he didn't exist, by the way. As funny as that is. But
so why did you yeah, no surprise there. Dal, why did you think it was a god? Did it say I am a god and I don't exist?
No, it was while I was flip-flopping through dimensions and like I was experiencing life through points of views of other people. Sometimes they were in like really horrible situations and I would have to like not go there.
Right.
And so I could kind of like will myself away from all this terrible shit my mind was doing.
Right.
And in the process of doing that, I felt like I was like there was a communication happening, something. Like I was asking something in some sort of weird nonverbal way to not lead me into this weird hellscape that it's kind of going to halfway, and then the other half was like the super awesome, divine, cool part. And then I kind of zoomed out and saw like just a super trippy, infinite mandala progression into like everywhere I looked spiraled into infinity. And I had a conversation.
Wait, when you say spiral into infinity, can you describe that a little more? Like, why would you say infinity to describe it?
It's like a Mandelbrot set, or something like that, where it repeats itself into itself, so I can kind of assume it's infinite, and it appears that way. But,
right?
It's a thing. And it was kind of like that.
Yeah. See, that's why I say like do it in nature, because like when you experience like those hallucinations, it looks like it's in place. Like you're meant to see the world this way, and it's just a nice treat.
when
You
I was
know?
seeing trees as fractals and I was still like conscious and walking around, I would see that Mandelbrot set of infinite trees inside of the leaves of the trees. I couldn't not see it. Like I would blink and rub my eyes and I would still see it. And
I love that feeling of
real.
not being able to turn it off. Like it's such a great enjoyment. Like I'm actually experiencing it. Like you close your eyes and shake it off. Like no, it's still there.
Wow. Yeah, 'cause I think we have these things sometimes, like our visual perceptors will go a little fuzzy sometimes, and we have that tendency to, we rub our eyes and then it works things out because it was really kind of on the surface of our lens. But yeah, in this case, it's like, no, it's running deeper than that.
Yeah, and the weird thing is I hear now that it visual acuity is up when you're on shrooms, and that confuses me with all of the shroom stuff. I'm like, or with all of the fractal stuff. I'm like,
Dude, that's why I struggle with my buddy Tim. He does the most mind blowing art while he's tripping. I can't even write hello when I'm tripping. Like I don't like, and if I tried, I could probably try it, but like when I say I can't write it, I can't like write it straight and in a place that's meant to go. Like I can't follow a line, you know?
yeah,
Like if you give me a set of lined papers and said write one word straight on the line, I would not be able to do that while tripping. Yeah, here my buddy is doing like an awesome portrait for 3 hours tripping balls. I don't. I think some people can do it, but I'm clearly not one of them.
I think it's something I've noticed with shrooms is you really want to stay in motion. So like if you're on a walk and you're on shrooms, started your trip on a walk, when you stop, you will feel weird. Like you won't really want to stop. You'll want to keep walking. And then if you stay stopped for a while, you'll settle down, and then you won't want to move later.
So, Dal, you're saying like you won't want to do X, like you're speaking about it like in kind of universal terms. But don't you think people have different experiences with that than you do with those drugs?
What I'm trying to say is you won't really want to change what you're doing. I've noticed that you might enjoy anything, but then once you're doing that thing, change it. If someone says, "Hey, could you do this?" you'll be adverse to that. You'll be like, "What? No, I'm playing in this mud puddle." Or whatever you're doing.
Is that the same for you, deniability? Like that idea of change?
Yeah, except I think a better understanding on it. So part of it is you just do not care about anything. That I find very pleasurable. Like it is completely carefree. Like you don't care if you're walking through a forest 10 kilometers or if you're chilling on a rock. Like where you are is where you are.
So when you say not care, is it that you're not caring, but it's more you're just no longer worrying?
No. Specifically, not caring. Like you like for example, you'll know that okay, cool. You want to eat some food now, and that involves taking a slice of bread out of the plastic bag and putting some meat on it.
Yeah.
I've had times where I've gone as far as opening the bag and I'm like, fuck, I'm hungry, but I just don't care enough to do this anymore, and then I chill and I go back to chilling and like looking at the sky. Like even though I'm hungry and I want to eat, I don't care enough about it to do anything about it.
Do you think that experience, what you're talking about, the losing care, what leads some people to suicide during these very bad trips?
No, it's not that sort of care. It's not like a existential thing. It's like you know what you need to do, but you're so happy to keep doing what you're doing that you don't care enough to change what you're doing to go do that kind of vibe. Like it's not like a depressive not care. It's like a freeing not care, you know? it's really hard to describe unless you've experienced it.
I mean, it makes sense. I was just wondering if this is better understood through the lens of worry instead of care, because care, the way I view care is that, you know, you're still caring to continue experiencing pleasure through the clouds or whatever you were saying before. So it seems like care isn't dead, but perhaps what is dead is the worry of caring.
Motivation might be a better way to do it. Like,
oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
You're just not motivated to do anything.
Yeah.
Even if you decide you want this, getting that motivation to actually get up and go do it is an entirely different story.
Right.
But but like what Daltu was talking about, like walking versus stopping. Like these drugs change very much according to what you're experiencing. So something as simple as, like, you could be having a bad trip because you're too hot and you're sitting in the sun with like a whole bunch of warm clothes on, but you are too hot, but you don't feel that you're too hot because your hot senses, your heat sense has been swapped around with something else,
right?
And you don't know what that is, so you're feeling discomfort and maybe pain even, but you don't know why that is, and that could cause you to have a bad trip. So just something as simple as taking off your jacket can stop a bad trip. Something like if you're sitting underneath the tree and it's too cold, or the wind's blowing and it's irritating you, but you don't know why you're irritated, you can start to have a bad trip. And the benefit of having a buddy is usually you can see when someone's starting to trip out a little bit, and because you when you're in that position, you struggle to self-motivate to, like, I've had times where I know that if I just stand up and walk 10 paces, the whole thing will change and it'll be just something different, but I struggle to get myself to do that. And it's the role of your buddy to go, oh shit, you're starting to trip out, come, let's get into just stand up, or move 10 feet to the right, or put a jacket on, or take a jacket off, or something along those lines.
Interesting.
Yeah, but yeah, like if you go through a buddy system, you do it in nature, like in a pot, like maybe you go rent a cabin in the woods for like a long weekend, go with like a couple of good friends, trip out as a group, and just look after each other. Pretty much guaranteed you're not going to have a bad trip.
What about deniability? You and like, what about sex with this with psychedelics and let's open it up to hallucinogenics and things like this. Does this kill your sex drive? Because I remember you describing you have quite a high sex drive. What does that do to your sex drive? And have you had experiences with sex and this combined?
It doesn't kill your sex drive so much, but the sexual experience is challenging.
Is it kind of connected to that motivation thing?
Not so much the motivation, more attraction levels. Because like you could be with the most beautiful woman in the world, and you look at her face, and she'll have like two eyes to the left and her mouth off to the right, and it'll be all twisted, and you're like, no, I don't want to kiss that. Like it's because it's not attractive.
You might look downstairs and see something very terrifying.
Yeah. That being said, I have had good sexual experiences while specifically candy flipping. So combining MDMA with specifically LSD, very pure LSD. There's something about pure LSD. It's weird, like, and I don't know why it is the case, but like when I'm having heavy visual hallucinations on mushrooms or any other hallucination, it's there no matter where I look. Like I look at the tree and it's twisting and morphing. I look behind me, my tent's twisting and morphing. I look up and like the clouds are swirling and the mountains like rolling over itself. And no matter where I look, I'm hallucinating. But with pure LSD, I have no idea why it's the case, and it's why I prefer to take it when I'm in built-up areas or at a party where there's man-made objects. I look at the speaker on a dance floor, I can see it perfectly, no hallucination whatsoever. I the words on a page and it's all squiggly and I can't read. And like I look at other people and they're hallucinating, but like I look at the stage, I look at the grass, and it's there, you know.
Right.
And it's not moving or turning in on itself or anything like that. But that seems to be something unique to pure LSD, maybe because it's being chemically engineered. I don't know.
And is that kind of not in tune with what most people that you've talked to about experiencing pure LSD? Like, are you kind of an outlier here, or is that kind of typical?
No, that's why people seek pure LSD, because you have a lot more motor control and visual control. So if you're gonna go to like a party in a built-up area and you're gonna maybe go club hopping, and for whatever stupid reason you want to trip, pure LSD is the way to go, because you'll be able to at least control yourself enough to walk out the door and walk in a straight line to the next club and then into the next club, you know?
Right.
Whereas if you're tripping hard on mushrooms, you might struggle to do that.
Might struggle to get your shit together.
Yeah. To pull yourself towards yourself is what
Right.
you are often requested to do.
Well, dude, this has been awesome. I can't wait for next week. I know you had some things on your schedule a little later today, so we'll give you as much time as possible here. But dude, I just want to thank you. This was really wicked, and I can't wait to do this again.
Cool, welcome. And I have a plan to bring this into a favorite subject of yours.
Okay.
But we'll get there.
Cool, man.
We're gonna bring predeterminism into this.
Very nice. All right, dude. Thanks, Niability, and thanks everyone that's still in the room here.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Good night, guys.
All right, dudes. That was awesome. Very awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed that. If you did, if you're watching here on Twitch, thank you very much for watching, and share. Help the Pangburn cause by sharing this content. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit the like button. Make sure you're subscribed. Hit the notification bell. We're going to be bringing a lot of these Pangburn hangouts to you. Our admins and mods on Discord are they're each being given their own kind of segment based on, you know, their experiences and professions and things like this. So I'm really excited to be doing this, and it's a privilege and an honor for me to sit back and allow these interesting people to help upgrade my software and help upgrade the software of the Pangburn followers. So thank you guys so much. And as always, let art and science inspire.